Well, good afternoon. Today we're going to be talking about the Section 609 Automotive AC Certification. We're first going to be doing the training, and then we will be doing the test. The test is an open book test and does not require no timing for that test. As you all know already, my name is Eligio Marquez. I am a CC adjunct instructor and a program director for the Transportation Technology Department here in Palm Beach State. So, we're going to start talking about the legislation. And this legislation, it came that the automotive air conditioning is regulated by the EPA. And it's regulated by that Section 609 of the Clean Air Act, which is what we're going to be talking today. In this legislation, it says that technicians must have a license granted after passing 609 test. It's a lifelong license, and the technicians should know all the laws to this law. There are some different companies that offer this testing, but the only really more authorized people to do this is ESCO, which is the one that we're going to be using today, MAX, and ASE. There is others, like I mentioned, but not all of them are really credentialed by the EPA to be doing this at this moment. So in the principles of the AC, we have that the function of the air conditioning in HVAC systems is to reduce temperature and humidity inside the passenger compartment. So we'll have fresh air coming through the front of the vehicle, plus the fan that's behind there also. But that fresh air is going to be coming in, that fan's going to be pulling that air in, and that fan, what it's doing, it's besides cooling the evaporator, it's cooling also the radiator. So what it does is that that air that comes in through there will take the heat out of that radiator and that condenser, and it will take out the heat out of there so that it could be cooled down for the air conditioning to work properly. Heat energy cannot be created or destroyed, can only be transferred from one object to another. That is called heat transfer. When we look at the three ways that heat can be transferred, we're looking at conduction, which would be an example that we're using here. It's a piece of metal where the heat is only on one side, and it will be conducted through that whole piece, even though it's cooler on the other side. But eventually, as it goes and keeps heating that side, that heat will continue transferring. The same way, if we have our hand over a candle or something, it's through condensation that we will be receiving the heat in our hands. Also, it could be then by radiation, like in this last figure that we show here. If you have any questions, you can ask whenever you have them. I will answer them in a moment. Heat energy is measured in British thermal units, which we call BTUs. Water cannot get hotter than 212 grades Fahrenheit at atmospheric pressure. Why is this?
That's what I was wondering.
Water itself, if it doesn't have no additive in it, will start evaporating after 212 grades Fahrenheit. So that's why it can't be on a temperature more than that. That's why it's not recommended to use water only in radiators. Fluid in air conditioning is refrigerant. Each vehicle has a low side and a high side. There's a difference between a low side and a high side if we talk about regular HVAC systems in a house or a business or a building than what we have in a vehicle. In a vehicle, we use seven different components for the air conditioning system, which And the house, we kind of have the same thing, but there's only 4 major components. In this case, we have number 1, which is the fan. The fan, depending if it's in the front of the vehicle or behind the radiator and the condenser, it will or pull or push the air depending on where the position is. So in this case, we're showing it in front, so it's pushing the air through that condenser. From there, number 2 is the condenser. Condenser, what we'll do is that it'll come in liquid on one side because it's hot, and then it'll come out, there's where we will cool it down. So that way we can continue our process. The dryer, what the dryer does in the vehicle is that it will take all the humidity that is in that system and that refrigerant. If by any chance it gets humidity, the refrigerant does not work well. So that's what the dryer does. The next one is going to be the metering valve. The metering valve in a vehicle has 2 purposes. It has this that you see here is a thermostat. So that goes in front of the evaporator inside the vehicle, so it will measure the temperature that's going on inside the vehicle. And depending on that, this metering valve will open or close to start letting loose some of that refrigerant in the form of gas. Number 5 is the evaporator. That's the one that is already cooled down. Everything is cold there. So we have the blower, which is number 6, that will be blowing inside the vehicle and letting you know, or not letting you know, giving you that fresh air or that cool air. And then number 7 then will be the compressor, which what it does is it'll compress and recycle again that refrigerant. Everything we see in red here is our high side, everything in blue is our low side. Okay? So, without proper refrigerant levels, air conditioning will not work effectively. This is because if we have too much refrigerant, that refrigerant will not let the compressor work properly, because it's compressing too much, and compressing too much, it does not let it do its work like it's supposed to. If we have too low refrigerant, then it will not cool down enough, and you will not be receiving that cool air that you're supposed to be receiving.
That's why sometimes your air conditioner blows kind of warm air because it doesn't have enough in there.
Correct.
Okay.
That also happens if the fan in the condenser is not, when you're stopped in a signal and that fan is not working properly, it's lacking of power, so that does not let it cool down enough so that you receive that cool air when you're stopped.
Oh, okay.
And then when you start running, since you have that air coming, that, it's coming naturally, it cools down again.
Okay. So that's because you have problems with the fan that does
Correct.
that. Oh, okay.
Correct.
It's the same when you hear the noise that is when it's starting something.
Well, that's when the compressor applies.
Okay.
When the compressor applies, it's taking power from the engine, so you hear that noise and you feel that the RPMs kind of go down a little bit
down
until
and
they
like a
recuperate and go back
refrigerator.
again. As soon as the computer understands that it was that the compressor started.
Okay.
How do you say that? They go.
It's a very difficult word to say.
R12, that's how you say it,
Yes.
R12.
So R12 was the first refrigerant that came out for vehicles. At that time, one of the major brands was Freon. So what we started saying everywhere was Freon, instead of saying refrigerant R12.
Okay.
We adopted that name as if R12, everybody was Freon, and it's not everybody's Freon.
No, I
Freon
know,
is
it's
just a
your
brand.
Kleenex.
Correct.
Okay.
Just the same as Kleenex, correct.
Okay.
After R12 came R134A. Why the change? R12 would highly contaminate the atmosphere or the ozone. So that's when we had to change to R134A, which was very harmless compared to R12. And the only thing with R134A is that cooling down the system or being more colder, if the AC in the vehicle was in aluminum, it was a little bit harder. Because the aluminum kinds of holds the heat. So going through an aluminum system with the R134A was a little bit, to cool down the inside of the vehicle was more time, especially in the European cars, which are the ones that brought everything in aluminum. So then now, starting 2 years ago, 2017, came out R1234YF. There's a big difference between these three, because when we changed from R12 to R134, all we had to do was we would take out the R12, we would open all the systems, we would change the O-rings, which were black at that time, we would change those O-rings for green ones, which are the ones for R134A, because they hold more pressure than the black ones. And then on the fitting for R12, we would have put an adapter, and then we could just fill out the same car that had R12 with R134, was just doing that. Now with 1234YF, we are not allowed to do that anymore. R1234YF has a different coupling, and you can't use or the R12 or the 134A gauges there, because R1234YF is highly flammable.
Oh.
So the pressures are more higher, so we can't use none of that we used to use for these two, we cannot use them in 1234.
So the 1, 2, 3, 4, that's more for the newer cars, they only use only 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right now, not all the manufacturers are using it yet,
Oh, okay.
but by the law that we're going to be seeing it here, there's going to be, it's going to be around, for every brand, it's going to be officially in 2022, where they cannot make any cars with 134A anymore.
Okay.
It has to be 1234. But there's an exception in light duty trucks, which is in 2021. So after 2021, every light duty truck has to have 1234.
Okay.
All the others would be for 2022.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, so when we talk about condensers, the condenser, like I kind of explained a little bit in the first picture that I showed, is that it transforms the high pressure gas into high pressure liquid. Okay? And we have two types of condensers. We have the serpentine condenser type, and then the parallel flow condenser type. Okay? So they will all be the same in that aspect that it will come in high pressure from one side in a form of vapor, and it will go out high pressure, but it's going to be liquid already. And the same on this one. This one is that the flow goes down here and then starts going across. On this first one, then it comes from here that way. And it's kind of the same thing, but it's the way it's, they did it a parallel flow, while here what they did was just one route, one serpentine going side to side. Refrigerant sales restrictions. There is an overview on this. The sales restriction is established by EPA regulations 40 CFR Part 82 Subpart F under Section 608 of the Clean Air Act. Only EPA certified technicians which that is why you're taking this training today, are allowed to purchase ozone-depleted substances used as refrigerants. Technicians may be certified under either the Section 608 or Section 609 Technician Certification Programs. Starting on January 1st, 2018, the requirements discussed on this page will also apply to most substitute refrigerants, including HFCs. Okay? The HFCs, if you remember, they were the R12 and the R134A. Continuing the overview, the sales restriction covers refrigerants contained in cylinders, cans, or drums, except for the sale of small cans of substitute refrigerants. Example, R134A for use in a motor vehicle air conditioners. This sales restriction does not cover refrigerant and air conditioning equipment or components containing refrigerants. Okay, one thing is motor vehicle, one thing is equipment, two different things. Okay? So, who should have EPA Section 609? Any person who repairs or services a motor vehicle air conditioning MVAC system for consideration, payment, or bartering must be properly trained and certified under the Section 609 of the Clean Air Act by an EPA-approved program. All technicians servicing MVAC-like appliances must be certified.
So even if you're not buying it, the product, even if you're servicing them, you still have to be certified?
If you're servicing, you
Okay.
have to be certified. Okay? If you go and buy it, which we just saw that there's restrictions now on that, you can go right now and you can buy, before you could go and buy how many cans you needed of R134A,
Yeah.
but now you can't. You can only buy in one, you can only go and buy one can now.
Okay.
If you could try to go and buy more than one, they're not supposed to sell you more than one can unless you show them your license, that your license EPA 609.
Okay, so the one can, that would be like if my car just has a leak and I want to repair it, or I want to replace it myself. That's why anybody would want to buy just go one can?
Yes.
Versus like do it yourself
But it's
first?
but still, you will see here
Yeah.
why you should not do that
Okay.
either. Okay?
Now the R12, can you even buy that anymore? The Freon, what was it?
Not exactly, and it's so expensive that nobody's buying it anymore. So it was replaced by,
What if you have a car that's like from the 70s or something?
you can still, like
You can use
I
the 1, 2,
mentioned,
3, 4,
you can
whatever.
retrofit, change
Okay.
the O-rings, and change the couplings, or put an adapter. It's really what we
Okay.
do. That just, you can just put it on there, and you can use the R134A.
Okay.
Okay? So, the overlap between Section 608 and Section 609. EPA regulations, 40 CFR Part 82 Subpart F, under Section 608 of the Clean Air Act, address the handling and recycling of refrigerants used in stationary refrigeration and air conditioning systems. That's for 608. Regulation 40 CFR 82, but Part B under Section 609 of the Clean Air Act specifically addressed the servicing of motor vehicle and air conditionings and back systems. Okay? And that is found in this link that I have here. And this link, I sent that page to all of you on the email that I sent you when you registered for the class. So, 608 versus 609. People who service or repair MVAC-like appliances, example, farm equipment, and other non-road vehicles, can choose to be certified under either the Section 609 program or the Section 608 Type 2 program. Due to similarities between MVACs and MVAC-like appliances, EPA recommends that technicians servicing MVAC-like appliances consider certification under Section 609.
Okay, so the guys that work on the farm equipment, like the guys at sugar farms, they don't have to have it, but it's suggested they have it.
Well, what it's saying is that they could have the 608
Oh,
Type 2.
oh, okay.
They could have that one, but what EPA is recommending is that they have the 609,
Cyclogran.
Okay,
okay? Because they are called MBAC-like appliances.
okay,
Because it's still a transportation vehicle, it's just that it's off-road or farm equipment like they mentioned here,
okay.
okay? Note that buses that use CFC 12, also called R12, are MBACs. But buses that use HCFC 22, also called R22, are not MBACs or MBAC-like appliances, but rather are high-pressure equipment covered under the Type 2 Section 608 certification. So that is why in the automotive and in the diesel program, we talk to the students about these licenses, and we do in the program the 609, but we also recommend them to get the 608, at least the Type 2, which is what covers this type of vehicles, which at the same time we're talking about airplanes, trains, and those other types of vehicles,
Okay.
that they use R22 and they don't use 134 or R12 or now the 1234. Okay? To be able to use R22, you have to have Type 2 Section 608. The Section 608 test includes 4 parts. It includes the core, the Type 1, the Type 2, and the Type 3. The test will bring everything. If you want to concentrate that you want to pass Type 2, you can do that. Or not do nothing in Type 3 and Type 1 and just answer Type 2, but the core, you have to pass the core. If you don't pass core and one of the levels, you're not certified in none of those levels. You have to, in this case, you would have to pass core and level 2. If you take the whole test and you pass all 4 tests, you're
better.
universal type.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So, let me go here, which it doesn't want to let me open it again. There it is. Okay. So, this is what I sent you in the email.
Okay,
And in the email, it's the same document, and it shows us what is covered under MBAC, what could be covered under both, 608 or 609. This one is 608, 609, sorry. These can be 608 or 609. But then when we're talking about trains, aircraft, passenger and cargo, refrigerated trailers, shipboat, passenger and cargo, these are R22. So these down here, which we call non-MBAC, you need to have the 608 Type 2.
because their systems are more like what's in a building more than what's in a.
Correct, correct,
Okay,
correct. That's why it has to be the Type 2.
that makes sense.
Okay? Type 1 is for houses, small equipment, and then Type 3 is for bigger
Commercial.
buildings, and like we have here in the college, that we have chillers and all that stuff.
Commercial.
Commercial, or commercial. Okay? So, we spoke at the beginning about the stratospheric ozone depletion, which that is what this refrigerant, R12, was harming. The cause of the depletion is because the high content of fluorine, chlorine, and carbon. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Ozone protects us from harmful ultraviolet radiation and helps to maintain stable Earth temperatures. Depletion of ozone in the stratosphere causes increased eye disease, skin cancer, crop loss, deforestation, reduced marine life, and increased ground level ozone. So that's why it gets hotter every year. Because there is places that are still using what they're not supposed to. not only refrigerants, but other contaminants. So one chlorine atom will have a chain reaction destroying as many as 100,000 ozone molecules.
Wow.
No person may service a motor vehicle air conditioner unless they have been properly trained and certified in how to properly recover and recycle the refrigerants. The Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol is an international agreement. It's a treaty regulating the production and use of CFCs, HCFCs, halogens, methyl, chloroform, and carbon tetrachloride entered into force in mid-1989. The penalty, this is the fun part.
Ooh.
Section 609 of the Federal Clean Air Act is regulated by the United States Environmental Agency, EPA. Failure to comply could cost you and your company as much as $27,500 per day per violation, and there is a bounty of up to $10,000 to lure your competitors, customers, and fellow workers to turn you in for any violation.
Wow.
Service technicians who violate these provisions of the Clean Air Act may be fined, lose their certification, and may be required to appear in a federal court. So for example, as I tell all my students,
Per violation too.
per
So
violation,
if two of them do it,
correct. So, like I tell all my students, if Sandy, you see that Greg is doing anything, any type of work in refrigerant, and you call EPA and tell them this, they will pay you $10,000, and Greg will have a problem because he'll be fined for $27,500.
I better go watch your students.
Sometimes. Well, my students are all certified. During the day, they take that in their class also. The night students, they don't go through the HVAC class, but that's why we made this training, so that you guys can also have this, because if you go and work at any shop and you have to only unscrew that compressor and move it aside just because it has refrigerant inside, you have to have 609.
Oh,
Okay? Not because you're going to work with it, but you're going to move that compressor to take that engine out, or to remove the steering pump, or maybe the alternator. It's under the compressor, and you need to move that compressor to be able to do that.
So
that's why
system on that.
anything that's related to refrigerant, you have to be certified just to unscrew it and move it to the side.
Wow.
Because when you do that, it starts leaking because something got bent or broken or whatever. You have to go get the recovery machine and all that, and you have to recover all that refrigerant right away.
Wow.
Okay? The 3 R's. The processes of recovery, recycling, and reclaiming sound similar, but they are quite different. To recover is to remove refrigerant in any condition from a system and store it into an approved external container. Recovered refrigerant may not be returned to a motor vehicle air conditioning system without first being recycled or reclaimed. To recycle is to clean refrigerant for reuse by separating the oil and removing moisture by passing it through one or more filter dryers. Recycled refrigerant may be returned to a MVAC. Contaminants in recycled refrigerant are limited to moisture refrigerant oil, and non-condensable gases to the levels set by the Society of Automotive Engineers. To reclaim is to process refrigerant to a level equal to new product specifications as determined by chemical analysis. Reclaimed refrigerant must meet standards set forth by the Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Institute and ARI Standard 700-93. Reclaimed refrigerant is intended for sale and may be used in any application. Required equipment. The EPA has approved the use of two types of equipment, called Recover Recycle, and the other one is called Recover Only. The Recover Recycle equipment extracts the refrigerant from the vehicle and cleans the refrigerant on site. The Recover Only equipment extracts that refrigerant into an approved container to be sent off-site for reclamation. Approved equipment must bear a label that states designed certified to meet SAE standards. So it can't be put into any container, and the container that it's approved must have this label on it. Okay?
So most like dealerships or large car repair places are gonna have this equipment that's gonna either recover, recycle, or recover only.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
If they work on ACs, they have to have it.
That is correct. Anybody that works with AC has to have one of these two machines.
Okay.
Okay? And that's what we don't see in people putting in refrigerant in their cars at home or none of that,
Right.
because they don't have these machines.
Yeah.
So, SAE replaced standard J2210 with standard J2788 in October 2006. Okay? Effective January 29, 1998, the EPA adopted ruling for recover recycle equipment where CFC 12 and HFC 134A shares a common refrigerant circuit. That's why at the beginning I mentioned that these two, by only changing the O-rings and the adapter, you could use one or the other.
Okay.
Okay? These single circuit machines contain special features to prevent cross-contamination in the refrigerant circuit and must meet SAE standard J1770. Okay? Recovery cylinders must be UL or DOT approved and must be hydrostatically tested and date stamped every 5 years. So that's kind of when you buy the cylinders for your barbecue, that they always look at them to see if they're not rusted and all that's the same thing here. Disposal of empty or near empty cylinders. Before disposing of any empty or near empty disposable cylinder, the remaining refrigerant must be recovered. Okay? Attach the cylinder to the recovery unit and remove any remaining refrigerants. Once the cylinder has been reduced from a pressure to a vacuum, it should be marked empty and is ready for disposal. So when we do this, and when we do the same thing that we have to do the vacuum in the vehicle to be able to put in new refrigerant, there is a 5-minute vacuum testing that we say, and it's that after you take all this refrigerant out and it goes into the vacuum state under 0 and you turn off the machine, it's supposed to not move or not start going up again. The rule is 5 minutes, okay? But when you do a second vacuum, the rule is 2 minutes. And we will talk about that also here.
So that's another reason why a do-it-yourselfer shouldn't do it, because there is no way to
Correct.
to dispose of that.
That's correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. When transporting cylinders containing used refrigerant, the Department of Transportation requires that you attach DOT classification tags and place a refrigerant label on each cylinder. Refillable cylinders used for transporting recovered pressurized refrigerant must be DOT approved. These vehicles also are the ones that we see in the street that has the warning signs around and all that, because this can be highly
Have the
flammable.
little placards on the back of the
Correct.
truck often, it
That's
says
a
hazard material.
hazard material.
Okay.
All refrigerant recovery cylinders should be inspected for rust. If they show signs of rust, they should be reduced to 0 psig and discarded. Some states may require special shipping procedures to be followed based on their classification of used refrigerants. Check with the DOT and EPA and the state of origin. Okay? With the recovery requirements, with the recovery unit shut off, wait at least 5 minutes, that's what I mentioned before, to determine if all refrigerant has been removed. If the system returns to a positive pressure, indicating that there is still refrigerant left in the system, additional recovery is required. So if we were doing a recovery that lasted maybe 10 minutes, and then we waited the 5 minutes and it went back to the positive side, that means that there is still refrigerant in there.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to give it more time for recovery. Then we will repeat the recovery operation until the vehicle AC system, then the vacuum remains stable for 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay? So that's kind of a double check to verify that everything is good. When the gauge set is removed from the vehicle or charging source, it must be connected to the recovery equipment to recover the refrigerant from the hoses. One of the most things that we see in all the shops, the repair shops, is that they disconnect the gauges off the car and they do not empty those through the vacuum system. They just come and hang them on the wall or whatever, and it still has refrigerant inside.
Okay.
So the law requires that you do a vacuum also on those hoses.
Okay,
Okay?
that makes sense.
Checking for non-condensable gases. Before charging a vehicle air conditioning system with a recycled refrigerant, the refrigerant container should be tested for the presence of non-condensable gases or air. Okay? There is a special equipment that you can buy, which is then another $1,000 that you would have to spend on another equipment. And that equipment, what it does is that it determines what type of refrigerant you have there and if it's contaminated or not.
Oh.
Okay? Leak testing. Although the EPA has not mandated leak repair at this time, when servicing an automotive air conditioning system, you should repair leaks whenever possible. Adding refrigerant to a leaking system is harmful to the environment, a waste of valuable refrigerant, and it is unlawful in some states. Before beginning a service job, the technician should perform a thorough visual inspection and leak check of the system. When we talk about waste of valuable refrigerant, when we had the R12 was about $6 to $10 a can, a little can. When R134 came out, R12 started to be $30 a can.
Oh, geez.
But now with 1, 2, 3, 4, R134 is remaining its price from $6 to $10 a little can. R12 went higher, but R1, 2, 3, 4, a little can is $160.
Holy cow. No wonder it costs so much to get your air conditioning fixed.
For now, for all these new vehicles, if they just need a little bit of refrigerant like they say, and it's leaking, it's gonna cost them a lot of money.
Between the price of that and the price of the equipment you gotta have to, for the check-in.
Correct.
Because, wow.
We're talking about if we buy the machine that can recover and recycle, we're talking there between $8,000 to $15,000 depending on how good is the machine that you buy. You can buy a machine that'll last you 3 years, or you can buy a machine that's gonna last you 8 or 10 years. Okay? So then we're talking about refrigerant. A little bottle is $160. If we buy the 30-gallon bottle,
Yeah.
we're talking about, it's almost $2,000 now.
Holy cow.
Which right now, I go and buy a bottle of 30 pounds of R134A for 120 bucks. That's a big,
Yes.
huge difference.
Oof.
The only accurate method to charge a system that requires a critical charge is to weigh the refrigerant into the system. A kilogram is equal to 2.2 pounds. 1 ounce is equal to 28.3495 grams. 1 gram is equal to 0.03527 ounces. Why are they saying this now? Because before, we would say, okay, this car uses 2 cans because it uses 2 pounds or whatever, something like that. So it'll use 2.5 cans, 3 cans, and you'll fill out that system. New modern vehicles, now on the label that's on the hood and the inside, says that that car is only going to use 1.2 ounces.
Oh, okay.
So if you don't have a $15,000 recover recycle machine that you can just go in and put in, you're going to just put in this amount of oil and this amount of ounces of refrigerant, you'll need a scale. And you'll have to weigh your cylinder, see how much it's weighing, and then as you start putting refrigerant in your vehicle, you're going to have to keep watching that scale until it goes down that specific amount.
And you have to know how to convert all that. If it doesn't
So you
measure
need
it,
to
that's-
know how to convert all
Jeez.
this. Okay?
Tell them to us. Wow, okay.
Okay? Safety. There's 3 major safety notes that EPA is saying for 609. And it says that when handling refrigerants or operating recovery recycle equipment, you should wear safety glasses, protective gloves, and follow all equipment manufacturer safety procedures, just the PPE. Inhaling refrigerant vapors can cause heart irregularities, unconsciousness, and oxygen deprivation, leading to death. Never expose CFC-12 to open flames or hot glowing surfaces. At high temperatures, R12 will form hydrochloric acid, hydrofluoric acid, and phosgene gas. Okay?
So be a scientist along with being an automotive mechanic.
Yes. HFC 134A, the July 20, 2015 rule bans the HFC 134A in new light-duty vehicles beginning in 2021. Remember I mentioned a little while ago that by 2021, every light-duty vehicle that uses 134A in 2021 cannot have 134A. Okay? And it says the rule, that bans the rule from July 20, 2015, because the rule said that for 2022 is when all the vehicles had to have 1234 YF. Most but not all automakers equip their vehicles with PAG oils. PAG and POE oils are more hygroscopic than mineral oils. Okay? Hygroscopic oil has an affinity for moisture absorption. If you remember in a few slides before, I mentioned that we have to eliminate moisture from the refrigerant.
Okay.
And that's one of the jobs that the dryer does. But If it has too much, that's what happens. Retrofitting to HFC 134A, you would have to replace the old dryer or accumulator with a new one that contains an XH7 or XH9 desiccant. That's what I was mentioning about replacing the dryer, the O-rings, and then putting the adapters. A compression ratio of 8.8 to 1 or higher may cause compressor failure. A high compression ratio can be caused by an overcharge, insufficient airflow, or an inefficient condenser.
So you said you have to replace the dryer and the compressor to go to the, from the, to the.
No, we need to replace the dryer or accumulator, which is the other name.
Yeah.
We would have to change it from the XH7 to the XH9.
Okay,
And then we would replace also the O-rings
The
from the
O-rings.
black ones to the green ones. Okay? Alternatives to CFC12. There has been an issue from when R12 was eliminated and we came to R134A, which in places where, I don't like to mention it, but I always have to, like China, they come out with these blends, which still have 12 mixed with 134A, maybe even mixed with R22, because they're not recycling them like they're supposed to.
ooh, yeah.
So those are the famous blends that I'm going to talk about here. As blends make their way into the retrofit market, you will need to understand how blends function. Some of the blends are ternary, which means they are a three-part blend. Most ternary blends are used with an alkyl benzene lubricant. Blended refrigerants will leak from a system in uneven amounts due to the different vapor pressures. Due to these varying vapor pressures, charging in the liquid phase is required. So we normally charge a vehicle with the cylinder up straight like we're supposed to through the low side. So if we're going to be using a blend, which we should not be using, but if we're going to use it, we have to charge in a liquid phase, which then the only way we can do that is that we're going to charge through the high side of the vehicle, and we got to turn upside down the cylinder.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
So there's like this, these blends and stuff, that's probably why some of the countries over, like China and the South, some of those countries, they have an extreme pollution.
Exactly.
And that's, could be one of the reasons.
That's
to
one
add
of the
to that.
reasons. Because, like it says here, because of the varying of the vapor pressures,
Yeah.
different vapor pressures, it can still leak. It doesn't matter what O-ring you put in it, doesn't matter. There's different pressures in there from those type of,
Well, they don't have the EPA regulations like we have.
they don't have them
Yeah.
like we do.
Which
Correct.
is, shows why it's good we have them.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so now we'll go to a 15-minute breaks, and as soon as we come back on those 15 minutes, we will start the test. It's an open book test, and no time limit. Okay?
Yes, sir.